Right, y'all. I'm back today to talk about environments. And so this is going to connect to the thinking that I've asked you guys to start doing about image of the child. And really, we're looking now through that lens of what does our environment convey or say to really look at what do we believe about children. If we think that children are capable and competent and can be independent, and all of these positive characteristics that we know to be true about children, right? Then how do we reflect that to them in the spaces that we set up for them? I'm gonna share my screen, um, maybe this way, so that I can talk to you about, and really the kind of overarching concept here is that, and this is a very Reggio inspired principle. So, what we know about the practices of the Reggio Emilia approach is that they see the environment as what they call the third teacher in the classroom, right? So there are usually two teachers in the classroom, and then they see the space, the setup of the furniture, the materials available to the children, all of the offerings in the classroom environment as one of the teachers, as a piece of the puzzle, if you will, that should be guiding behavior, that should be inviting children to think and play and learn in specific ways. Um, So, what I want to talk about again is how do the spaces that we offer children reflect what we think and believe about them? I'm going to identify some small and realistic shifts towards becoming more Reggio inspired with the environment. A lot of times, I think people, want to move in this direction, but they maybe don't know where to start, or they think it starts with something that maybe isn't the most natural place to start. And so I just want to offer a couple of ideas for things to think about. And then, yeah, we're going to just kind of practice observing our classroom as if you were one of the children in your space. And then I want to leave you with one or two possible concrete changes that you might be able to implement immediately to move into just thinking more deeply about your classroom environment. So, why does the environment matter? The environment is not, from my perspective and in line with my philosophy, it's not a decorative thing, right? We're not trying to decorate our spaces to make them look or feel a certain way. We're really teaching through these spaces, right? So when we put things on the wall, it should be about communicating something that we believe about children or about the work that they do while they're in our spaces, right? Um, when we are putting materials out on the shelves, same thing. Yes, there's an aesthetic piece to it. So we want our classrooms to be neat and well organized and to have a certain look and feel. But above and beyond that, the classroom space communicates expectations about behavior and learning. It can shape behavior in a very powerful way. I think spaces that are well designed for young children, um, when they have enough room to move about without, crashing into other people or things, when they have enough materials available to them, when the materials invite them to engage deeply, then we see this, kind of framing out the behavior that we see from children throughout the day. And then classroom environments can invite or limit curiosity and thinking, right? We really want our classroom spaces to invite children to think more deeply about whatever it is that they're playing with. And so we have to set the space up accordingly. So again, I'm just going to reiterate moving towards a more Reggio inspired environment, or an environment that maybe helps shape behavior or communicate expectations or invite curiosity or inquiry in a richer way. It's not about looking at Pinterest and seeing a picture and then copying that. It's really about thinking from your own classroom perspective. What is the thing that I'm trying to accomplish here, and how can I do that best in this space with these children and with the materials that I have available? So just a something to think about. What do you think that your classroom environment currently communicates to the children about who they are as learners? I chose this picture because it shows a little fella in a classroom and he's looking at a documentation piece, either of work that he has done or work that his peers have done in a classroom. And in that documentation, not only do I see work samples of the children. I see several drawings, a painting. I see photo images of the children doing that work. And then there's a write up from the teacher. I'm making an assumption here, but I assume it tells the story of the play that's happening, probably includes some of the children's language, things that they said specifically. So to me, when I see this type of display in a classroom, it says to me the children here are valued for the things that they create, for the things that they say, for the things that they think, whether they're accurate or inaccurate, right? We're documenting what we see the children doing. And then that's a starting point for the teaching and the learning that's going to come next, right? So take a minute, just think, do I have displays, materials, spaces in my classroom that are communicating something to the children? And if so, what does that look like in your classroom? When we really get down to thinking about this kind of Reggio inspired practice compared to or contrasted with a more traditional approach, there are some kind of fundamental assumptions that tend to be really different in the two approaches, right? So, a traditional assumption of children is that they need explicit direction and instruction on how to accomplish a task or an experience, an activity, right? Kind of the contrast to that from the Reggio inspired approach, we really are trying to look at it through this idea that children are capable and independent, right? So it's less about sitting them down and telling them, we're going to make this, here's how we do it, or we're going to do this is what we're doing, and really just providing them a space with some open-ended materials and letting them explore, letting them be curious, letting them kind of come to whatever they come to, right? And then it's about carefully watching that, thinking about, what were they doing? What do they know? What don't they know? All those questions that we as the teachers can ask. And then kind of ultimately the question is, how do we extend on what they do know, or how do we fill in the gap with what they don't know? But it's again a shift from thinking, I'm the teacher, I tell them what we're doing and how we're doing it, to I'm the teacher, I provide materials and I watch and see what happens. And then I plug in, right? So another one is that learning happens when children are sitting down at a table, or learning happens when children are sitting down at circle time, right? Learning happens when I'm teaching. That's more of a traditional model, traditional approach. A Reggio inspired assumption is really that learning can happen everywhere. And so I think again, it's shifting our focus as teachers away from those times when we're supposed to be doing direct teaching, to thinking about how can we embed teaching in all the things, right? Walking from your classroom to the bathroom after you've done the name to face business, that's an opportunity to teach, right? Um, that's an opportunity to embed a conversation about something that you were talking about in the morning or whatever. It's really just about, again, thinking maybe more big picture, that learning can be happening everywhere all the time for young children. And we can ask them questions like, what did you notice when we were outside on the, whatever. Asking questions, I think, is a real key way to dig into learning with children. Um, and finally, a more traditional assumption is that, and this really ties into the other ones, that teachers offer children materials and experiences, and that's how we create learning in the classroom, where a kind of contrasting approach is to think children explore materials to experience their own learning. And if you read those carefully, teachers control materials to create learning. Children explore materials to experience learning. We're taking the teacher out of the equation here, right? Um, there's a kind of fundamental belief in this that if I provide children with the right stuff, I don't have to teach them. They will come to learning on their own. And I truly believe that. I've seen it happen in my work with children for a very long time. It's a big shift, though, to move away from thinking um, that I have a responsibility to teach them, X, Y, and Z skills or X, Y, and Z content knowledge, and to really trust that if I give them appropriate and engaging materials, they will learn what they need to learn. Okay. So another just, kind of question to chew on is if we're talking about children as capable, curious, connected relationally to one another, to the teacher, to the space, what should the environment do differently then, right? How should an environment for children who are capable and curious and relational, how should it look, feel, work, function? All right. Um, I really want to take some time to do this with each one of you, kind of individually, classroom by classroom. So I'm just showing you, I guess, the lens that I want to be looking through together as we do a guided environment walk. So I want to walk through your classroom together, kind of looking and thinking about everything through this lens of the classroom environment, right? And talk about the materials that are available, the spaces that you've created, the aesthetics of your space, um, ownership for the children, like where are the children reflected in the classroom? Um, and then, sorry, I'm going to go back for just a second. After we've done this walkthrough, we're going to have, a kind of coaching conversation just to debrief. I know from being in your spaces that you guys already have strong spaces that are aesthetically pleasing for children. And so this is really just kind of taking a nuanced look, in particular, at the materials and maybe this aesthetics ownerships piece of, what could we look at more carefully in our classroom spaces. All right. And so I want to make sure to just say this. I think there's a tendency in early childhood, just across the board, to look at, and especially we live in such like a Pinterest culture now. You can Google or look up any uh, content of study, right? And you can find a majillion activities that you can just replicate in your classroom. Oftentimes they're cute and fun or whatever, but pretty cute, fun, all of those things. That's secondary, I guess, if you will, to my question, which is more related to what thinking on the part of the child do these materials or does this setup or this activity, what thinking does this invite the children into? And so I really, um, when we talk about classroom inquiry and curiosity from children, there are kind of a type of materials and spaces that I think lend more towards inviting children to think deeply. Um, and so there's a kind of a loose parts center shown for you here that I think personally open-ended loose parts materials that children can combine and create with in their own ways without a whole lot of guidance towards a product outcome. To me, these are the types of materials that invite curiosity and thinking best. And then, as promised, I have listed out 5 doable shifts. So if anything that I've said in this talk has made you think, perhaps there's, something we could do differently in our block center or in our housekeeping space or with the science materials, whatever, right? Or maybe you just want to take a closer look at your environments and really ask some of these questions. Is this inviting children to think? Is this aesthetically pleasing? These are the places that I would recommend starting, right? I think that before you add anything to the classroom, and this is again about being really intentional, I think it would be a best practice to look at, is there clutter and visual stuff that we can remove or take away so that we can increase focus on materials and spaces. I would recommend focusing on one material that you might want to upgrade in your classroom. So I'm a big advocate for natural materials, and I already said made with loose parts. So a lot of times that looks like what you see pictured here: wooden tubes, balls, rings, natural things from outside, sticks, shells, pine cones. You guys have probably heard all of this before, seen lists like this before, but I would start with one, so pull out a basket of plastic things and replace it with, I've seen classrooms where teachers took out all of the plastic food from their housekeeping center and they replaced it with like just natural tree cookie wooden blocks. And maybe one other loose parts material. And I've seen children pretend and play, with dishes and tree cookies, and they've used them as stakes, cookies, put them in a pitcher and poured them out like water. We're really giving children, I think, more opportunity to pretend and to think again. When we take away, a plastic set of grapes can only really be a plastic set of grapes unless you sort of intentionally repurpose those, but something that's more open-ended, like just a round wooden disc, it can be anything, right? So one material upgraded, creating an inquiry space. And this is something that I've already started conversation with some of you individually about doing in your classrooms. But maybe this is a table or a shelving surface that looks something like this, right? We're just giving children a space in the classroom, kind of outside of the standard centers where they can do some thinking and some inquiry about whatever comes up, right? I'm all in to help with setting something like this up in your classroom if you're interested. And like I said, in some spaces, it's kind of already naturally a part of what we're talking about. So I think having one focused inquiry space is a great thought, a great practice. Slowing down the displays, right? So this is my fourth idea. It's having fewer things on display and incorporating more process photos or quotes. So this is going back to this idea where, we're really capturing the heart of what's been happening in the classroom, in the learning, in the thinking about, it looks like animals here, but it's less, and this was a big shift for me to make, where I used to have a practice of doing some sort of art activity or something with children and feeling like I needed to put every child's up on the wall. I learned that there can be as much value in finding ways throughout the classroom to display what's happening with this 6 children over here and 4 different children over here than feeling like I have to put every child's, finished product up on the wall. So the recommendation is fewer pieces and more about the process and the children's language, their thinking, their learning, right? And then number 5, I know a lot of you are already doing this, but it might be that I'm suggesting thinking about how you might do this in maybe a more intentional way or a more creative way after you've done 1, 2, 3, or 4. But it's inviting the children into your process as a teacher, right? So I am thinking more about this new center that we put out with Loose Parts. How can we work together to take care of this table or this shelf? And so maybe you're thinking about creating new classroom jobs. Maybe you're teaching the children how to sort and reset the materials before they leave that space. Whatever you're doing, I know the children are already especially in some of the classrooms, part of the care of the space, but I think it's super important in building the kind of classroom culture that we want to have, that we're partnering with children in that. Okay. I've given you a little bit to think about. So, last question for you is what feels most doable for you, maybe in the month of March or April? What is anything from this appealing to you, making you think more deeply about your space? And if so, what does it look like to make a shift? I would like to discuss these things with you guys together. And so it's something that you plan to notice more carefully, something maybe that you want to try to shift in your classroom and your practice. And then if you can come up with a question or something that you're curious about in your space, I would love to dig into those questions with you also. Okay, that's all I have. So I will talk with you each about these individually, and then I look forward to walking through your classroom spaces um, and kind of looking at things more carefully together. All right, thanks.